And so as hard as it might be, as intense and emotional as it might be, it's necessary that when there's disagreement, when there's conflict, that we come together and open the door for discussion, especially when we feel safe to do so. Welcome back to another episode. And I am your host. And as always, I am grateful to be with you for another episode. So as you all know by now, my TEDx has released, it is out, and I am so honored and grateful to have been named editor's pick. That is an honor that 1% of TEDx speakers get to hold. And what it represents is that the topic that I chose, which is why I'm sorry it doesn't heal relationships, moving from apology to repair, that it was very relevant for the times and apparently delivered in a way that inspired them. And so I want to thank everyone who has already listened to the talk, those who have shared. I mean, it has been such an amazing experience to see people be impacted by my sharing. And so I just want to start by thanking you as a listener, especially if you've already listened, if you have shared the talk with others, if you've commented, thank you so much. Hey, before we get back to the episode, I want to take a moment to share something close to my heart. 17 years ago, someone saw my leadership before I could see it myself. That experience changed everything for me. And that's exactly why I created the REMAP cohort. If you're a woman physician or leader in healthcare who's tired of being talked over, burned out from carrying conversations you don't have language for, or just craving a space where you don't have to explain being the only one in the room, this is for you. REMAP is a 4-month cohort, a small, intimate community for women, physicians, and leaders in healthcare, where you'll build real communication skills and community, navigate the hard stuff, and yes, earn CME credit in the process. 22 Category 1 AMA CME to be exact. Listen, you deserve a space that pours into you, not one that continues to extract from you. Find out more, reserve your spot, or schedule a discovery call at mindremappingacademy.com. Also, the link is in the show notes. If you haven't listened yet, no worries. Guess what? I will have the link in the show notes. And also, I will be hosting a few of these deepening conversations. I've already hosted one, and I'll be hosting a few more of these conversations to deepen the insights and the learnings from the talk, as well as celebrate and have some discussion and sharing about, the path forward. So with that, I say all that because one of the things I talk about in my TEDx talk is conflict. And I talk about this conflict that I had with growing up and as a young adult with my mom. And so one of the things that I have come to learn, not just in my relationship with my mom, but in my relationship with people in general, my relationship with friends, and my relationship with significant others that I've had, is that conflict avoidance does not solve the problem. In fact, it can actually deepen the fracture. And so, as a person who is I would like to say recovering conflict avoidant, but let's be real, I'm still quite conflict avoidant. I've just learned to navigate and deal with my feelings that come up when things are in disagreement, or when I'm in disagreement, or when I'm in a space of conflict. I've learned how to regulate my emotions. I've learned how to be brave and courageous. However, I am highly conflict avoidant. If I can avoid it, I will. And I would just assume fade away into the bushes like Homer Simpson. If you know, you know. But I've learned over and over again how when we allow those emotions, because what happens, here's the thing about being in disagreement or being in conflict. It is one of the reasons why it's so uncomfortable for us or for people, is that it's both a content issue and an emotional issue. It's multiple dimensions, right? So it's content It often could be beliefs and ideals or internal thought process or filters, but it's most certainly involves emotion. Think about a time when someone disagreed with you, or when you disagreed with someone, someone was saying something and you were like, I don't know about that. Whether it was a strong emotion or whether it was a light emotion, an emotion came up. Could have been an emotion of disgust. It could have been an emotion of ambivalence. It could have been an emotion of anger. It could have been an emotion of confusion, like, what are you talking about? The point is that when there's any kind of disagreement in whatever part of the spectrum it is, whether it's just simple disagreement or whether it's on the spectrum all the way to overt conflict and confrontation, emotion is involved. And I don't know about you, but negative emotion does not feel good. Now, can it be fueling? Can it be motivating for some people? Absolutely. But does it feel good? Does it feel normal for some people? Have some people normalized anger, or have some people normalized sadness or normalized fear? Yes, or normalized being in the space of guilt because that's how they were raised or socialized in their upbringing. Yeah, so it can feel normal if you're operating. It can feel like the water that the fish is in if that's something you're operating. But just because it feels normal doesn't mean it feels good, right? Being numb does not necessarily feel good. So, my point being is that if you think about a time when you were in some type of conflict or confrontation or disagreement, that feeling in the body doesn't necessarily feel good. And oftentimes, when we experience a negative emotion, we want to push it away. It's a human nature if you haven't practiced how to regulate and move these emotions through one's body. It is a very normal practice for people to push it down, turn away from it, ignore it. And so when that happens, the emotion, it doesn't necessarily go away. It just gets buried or it simmers. And so imagine there's a disagreement and it's enough to create a strong negative emotion, but instead of moving through it and moving through the discomfort of having a conversation to resolve that, to move that emotion out so that you can recover, restore connection, restore your own regulation, you push it down and simmer. Hey, before we get back to the episode, I want to take a moment to share something close to my heart. 17 years ago, someone saw my leadership before I could see it myself. That experience changed everything for me. And that's exactly why I created the REMAP cohort. If you're a woman physician or leader in healthcare who's tired of being talked over, burned out from carrying conversations you don't have language for, or just craving a space where you don't have to explain being the only one in the room, this is for you. REMAP is a 4-month cohort, a small, intimate community for women, physicians, and leaders in healthcare, where you'll build real communication skills and community, navigate the hard stuff, and yes, earn CME credit in the process. 22 Category 1 AMA CME to be exact. Listen, you deserve a space that pours into you, not one that continues to extract from you. Find out more, reserve your spot, or schedule a discovery call at mindremappingacademy.com. Also, the link is in the show notes. And so what that does is that simmering, that emotion is there, but it also has a direct link to our thoughts. It creates a filter on how we think. And this is all happening in us, but it's also happening in another person. When we're avoiding, then what happens is we start to make up stories in our head about what's going on, about how the other person's feeling, about what they should or should not be doing, about what we should or should not do, about the state of the relationship. All of this, and we haven't even connected and talked about what's important to us with regard to where the disagreement is. We haven't talked about the actual emotion or the feelings that are coming up for us around the disagreement or the conflict. Even if we don't know the exact emotion, we might say, ooh, that hit me some kind of way, or that was intense, or I don't know how I'm feeling about this. Even that is an expression of some feeling that we're having that opens the conversation for discussion rather than shuts it down. Now, admittedly, we may, if the emotion's on 10, we may need to step away while we bring ourselves to a space where we can connect to our thinking brain rather than to that hijacked reptilian brain, especially when our, conflict is one of those things that when people experience it, it can activate that threat detection system. So when we are able to get back into, realize that we're safe, realize that we're not in immediate physical danger, and when we can reconnect to our higher thinking brain, then that allows us to be able to then think about what is it that's not being heard, what is it that's not being held, and what may need to be healed or restored in between you and the other person. And so when we avoid doing that, when we refuse to acknowledge, when we avoid that conversation, it does deepen the fracture because we each party has some kind of incomplete story that's happening in their mind. And so I do understand that sometimes there's an inability to reach out to the other person. For example, I did have a relationship, a friend, the girlfriend relationship, with which we were friends for many, 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 many years. And suddenly I noticed that she just stopped reaching out. I would reach out, she wouldn't reach back. I would reach out, she wouldn't reach back. And, every now and then she might give a hi, but I started to realize that she was pulling away. And there's only so much that I can do to reach out to say, hey, I knew there was something happening. I didn't know what it was. I do know that both she and I have conflict avoidant tendencies, but this is a friend of almost over 10 years. And I wanted to at least kind of know what was happening. For several months, there was no conversation. And then finally, we did have an opportunity to talk about what had happened. It was a very intense conversation. It was a very tearful conversation. And it resulted in the completion of that relationship ultimately. Not immediately, but ultimately, she wanted to take some time to think it over. I wanted to take some time to think it over. And eventually, some months later, I realized, because after outreach, there was no response, that relationship was complete. My point was, the whole time during that initial phase where she was not speaking with me, I had a story going on in my mind. And I understood that it was a story. It was an incomplete story because I hadn't talked to her, but still it was a story nonetheless. And so when we do not come together and connect, then we're left with an incomplete story, with an incomplete perspective. And so, as hard as it might be, as scary as it might be, as intense and emotional as it might be, it's necessary that when there's disagreement, when there's conflict, that we come together and open the door for discussion, especially when we feel safe to do so. So I will continue this conversation this quarter. I'm talking a lot about conflict. I'm talking about all of the ways that we process conflict. I'll talk about some ways that we can navigate it. But I also want to invite you to come to the deepening session. I will post the link of that in the show notes for when the next one is. And then this is what the course is about as well. We have a new and improved version, so version 3.0. I'm always upgrading and updating the course. I have a new and improved version. I invite you to check it out. I'll put the link of that in the show notes as well. And, share this episode with a friend, with a family, with a colleague. And because I think it's helpful to understand that where there's silence, there's harm. And I'm not talking about mindful silence or quiet. I'm not talking about coming back and thinking through things. I'm talking about where there's silence, there can be harm. So with that, I leave you. And if you're new to the podcast, remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thank you for your listenership. Without you, there's no podcast. I look forward to seeing you in the event and possibly beyond that. And until the next time I see you, stay empowered.